and it demonstrates that commitment to survivors and I think potential perpetrators. So what does this bill do? It creates a minimum standard for rape kit testing in our state and provides a reasonable time for that processing. It establishes a tracking system to improve efficiency and transparency, and it requires an annual report to the legislature to provide us with a continuing view of how the system is running. Currently, with no statute in place, there is room for inconsistent approaches that could impact efficiency and service. Somebody recently, kind of leaned over and said to me, if you don't have rules in place, how do we know what to follow? And that's true. If we don't have good, consistent methods to inform our state law enforcement agents, it's difficult for them to provide consistent service from the state. So I think this is a real good support for law enforcement as well. Matthew Gammett, who will talk a little bit, has been working very hard to create an interdisciplinary team to respond to this issue. And I actually attended one of those meetings this fall. And the main question I heard that many of the people were discussing was which kits should we process and how? And initially when I heard that, I was a little troubled, but there are some complexities to that question that go into prosecution, investigation, as well as victims reporting. So it's not as easy as I once thought, and actually retracted from some of my initial thoughts about that. So in that question then, which ones should we process and how? This bill clarifies and codifies which kits to test and in what reasonable timeline to do it in. This bill will support victims, law enforcement, healthcare providers, prosecutors, and other criminal justice personnel because they will be operating from the same set of rules and the same playbook. It clears up misunderstandings and provides a clear protocol to improve our service to victims. So which kits will be tested? They'll all be tested unless a victim expressly says not to, which is very common in our sexual assault laws, or there's no evidence of a crime being committed. How long will it take? The timeline we have set aside is 30 days to get the kit to ISP, and then ISP will have a 90-day process or a turnaround to enter the data in the CODIS database, which you'll hear more about. And Representative Lugar was good in reminding us in the initial language, what if somebody doesn't meet that deadline? We don't want to penalize a case in prosecution or inhibit speedy trial. So we did add language, and that was reviewed by the prosecutors and ISP to make sure we got that in a good spot. So thank you for that. If the kit isn't turned in for processing at all, this bill then indicates that law enforcement will consult with the county prosecutor and the county prosecutor will sign off. And that's not a real cumbersome or laborious process because law enforcement is really communicating with their county prosecutor anyway. This puts one more set of eyes to be sure, hey, we don't need to test it, or should we? And then tracking. The ISP will be promulgating rules to devise the best tracking system, and then they'll be responsible for checking back with the legislature and providing that data for the public. I'm going to let Matthew talk a little bit more about the fiscal note, because I do think that's important. If we are actually going to hold criminals accountable, we have to have good systems in operation. We have to fund them appropriately. And if we don't want to get into a situation where we have a large backlog or people are criticizing our state, we have to have the resources to support law enforcement, prosecutors, and victims to make sure that's happening. As well as we know, again, it could exonerate somebody if necessary.